Dr. Marc Cooper, welcome to the channel. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I rarely get to address a younger audience that is in what I would say a interesting place on the planet at this moment in time. In the Buddhist tradition, and actually in the Hindu tradition, after you die, you go through 7 stages, and they call between stages the bardo, where there's tremendous uncertainty, things are unknown, and there's discomfort because you are not in control. And I think that's the feeling that many people have at this moment.
Okay. I did tell you when I first reached out to you that I would like to interview you for a very particular reason. That reason is my channel that I started, and it's all about sharing wisdom, stories, and life experiences, in particular with younger generations. When I browse the internet or spend time researching for various projects that I'm working on, I stumble across a lot of content, and that content is aimed primarily at younger people, influencing them not necessarily in a positive way, where they see different outlets and content that tells them you have to be very rich, good looking, and accumulate a lot of materialistic things in order to be recognized and reputable in or around the world. So I'm hoping to get out of this interview, get some stories and your thoughts and wisdom that you could potentially pass on to the younger generation and share some of those that could potentially convey values that are very important in life apart from materialistic things. There's nothing bad in shooting for the stars and being successful in life, but I think it's very important to remember some important values. So maybe we can start with the first chapter, and you could introduce yourself to the audience and give a little bit of a background, who you are and what have you been doing throughout your life.
All my life is 78 years, so there's a lot of life under this conversation. And it's gone through numbers of metamorphoses. It's a stream as opposed to a destinational stops. Things have led in from one place to another, taking me on a hearing the calling more clearly as I got older. And I think that's one of the issues that are occurring for I have a daughter who's 30. So I have somewhat of a direct experience of what it is that they're going through and how they listen, how they interact, what's their perspective of the world. When you get to be an elder, one of the things you learn to do is to live your life backwards, from your death going backward. So I have spent time with people at the end of life. And so what's important then and what they could have done and the regrets and the resentments have opened up a door to start trying to bring that to younger people earlier, so that when they have financial success is not going to get you there. Just doesn't. I have worked with people in multiple areas, healthcare, Fortune 100s, Fortune 300s. So I have this direct consulting and counseling experience of taking people through a particular process where they have gained what they think is going to relieve them of any of the discomfort of life. And all it does is push them to have more or better or different of the same thing. And that same thing isn't really what they're looking for. It's not going to give it to them. But there's the models that are available out there, the cultural influences that are so strong, don't allow for a different view of life, for people in that age range, and it's really unfortunate. There are no elders in our culture. In a non traditional culture, there are no elders. In a traditional culture, there are. So, my job really is to bring this phenomena of eldering into our culture so that people can have a sit down with somebody who is my age, who has been through a lot of experiences of life, who has gained direct knowledge and access to be able to talk to them from a viewpoint that they don't have to adjust themselves in the world. So that's my mission at this moment in time. And the background is ridiculous. 78 years, I don't know, 8 careers, 12 books, 2,000 articles. I mean, there's a lot. But right now is what really counts. And so I am out there trying to bring some, and I'll call it higher wisdom, which is far beyond knowledge. And we are living in a knowledge society, and they think knowledge is king, but knowledge is false king. Um, it limits the understanding of oneself and the ability to see oneself and to address the areas that cause pain or suffering psychologically or relationally. They don't have those tools yet. And thus, going for material success isn't going to resolve those set of issues. And eldering would bring a new way to see those issues such that they can be more resolved. Did that all
Okay,
make some sense?
it does. It's
Okay.
very clear.
Yeah.
So, in
Yeah.
that case, since you're dealing with a lot of elders and you mentioned quite a few things here, what would you say is the key to a successful and fulfilling life then? What could you tell the younger ones?
I, the first thing I do was to tell them to trust themselves rather than everybody around them that's telling them what to do in some form or fashion. Or the magazine covers where they're not good enough to compare to the who's on the cover. There's a self that they have been unable to engage with that's inside that they don't have great access to. And the further you go inside, the more free you are, the more you go outside in our culture as it's designed, our Western culture, the more imprisoned you are to their views, to the way they see you should be, so the way you should look, what other people have. So it's a comparison and contrast society in the way it's set up. But there's something much richer and deeper and healthier when you can begin to see, well, who am I really? Am I all these things that I'm supposed to be? Or by the way, who are they think they, between 16 and 30, there's a lot of things that look ideal to them. Looks, money, lifestyle, dress. Um, and so they have all this uh, pressure and all this ideal, supposedly that's where they should be. And ultimately, you realize an ideal is a failed future because it doesn't really exist. The more they can understand themselves as opposed to be drawn into that arena and begin to find the depth of knowledge and beauty and understanding and peace and ease and grace by developing themselves as opposed to being developed by the culture, there is something that will happen that will give them a much more satisfying life. Well, that was pretty well said, actually. So,
It was
okay.
indeed. It was indeed.
Yeah. Let's look. So, for number one, I want to take just a moment, and I would like to apologize to your audience. So, I'm a man of the '60s in many ways, and our generation stopped a war, And our generation had a president resign. And our generation demanded that integrity be part of government and how we live our lives. And we didn't get the job done. We didn't get the job done. We just let go. And you could see how powerful a culture is, that it took that vibrant core and it dissipated into whatever it is now. And I think part of the mission that I have is to bring that back in through eldering. So another thing that I'd like to be able to ignite in your audience is a kind of will to make change happen that is for the better good.
Okay, thank you for
And
sharing
I want
this.
to say I'm sorry. My team didn't get it done, but the geezers are coming back.
Every generation has its own battles and own challenges, and everyone does whatever they can to help or to ignore things. And while we're on the topic of challenges, what would you say are the challenges of the younger generations today? I mean, life in general is supposedly to be much better. We have automated many things, made jobs easier, made lifestyles easier. We have access to pretty much in an instant to any piece of information that we need to find online. We don't have to walk to libraries, buy newspapers anymore, anything like this. We have the social media environment, which is fantastic to communicate around the world. But at the same time, there are challenges where we see the pressure from the outside society around the world. Because now we're not comparing ourselves to the small circles around us in our society, neighborhood, schools, work environment, but we are now comparing ourselves to a big monster, which is the entire world. People live around the world and how they live the lifestyle and creating illusions that people want to achieve and gain. What would you say are the challenges that could be prevented, or how could the younger generation prepare themselves and look out for threats that could alter the way they're going to develop their life?
Everything that you spoke about is externally generated. So, and all those things, in my view, cause greater suffering because it brings up what you're not, or what you could be, or what you should be. So there's a perception that's created that increases the discomfort and challenge of living life into that. And it also has a interesting phenomenon of closing one down so they don't have to confront it to the same degree. It's just, oh, I'm not going out there. Um, I think the a couple bottom lines here. One, information isn't and knowledge is not going to get you there. It's not going to give you freedom. In fact, as I just said, I think it gives you more imprisonment. The more you know, that you're not any happier, you're not more able, your relationships don't work better. You still have to deal with your parents. You still have to deal with your neighborhood, and now you have homeless, and the whole deal is occurring, and it looks to be more chaotic. So everything out there. So what I believe they're interfacing with is greater uncertainty and chaos. That exterior is not going to be able to change to a significant degree. It will go in the course it's directed. But who I am about the external, who I am about homelessness, crime, guns in America, um, ridiculous politicians, all of that. Who I am about that is what I can do something about. And I do not think, and so all those challenges exist externally, but I think the greatest challenge is internal. Who am I? That, and how do I see it? And how am I being about these issues that's going to give me more ease, grace, peace, and power? Who's that? So I think they're working on the wrong thing. I think they want to gain more information, more knowledge, more technology, but there's something that they forget is they're the interface with all of that. I can't change that, but I can alter this so that I have greater capacity and mastery in this world. Does that communicate? Yes?
Yes, very
Okay.
much.
Okay. So I think that's the missing piece for them. Um, it would reduce their in the in what they're facing because there's no job security whatsoever. So that, and one of my eras, you got a job and you stayed at the job until you'd finished. But now things are changing so rapidly and information is impacting that, but so is mergers and acquisitions. And I'm watching what happened with AI and Google. And, I don't use Google anymore. I could open AI and I figure out what I need to do. So nothing lasts. You get to be in a world of impermanence. And for most people, the world of impermanence feels out of your control. And you have to figure out or scramble to be able to succeed as things come in and go out and change. And change is extremely rapid. But who I can develop in a way that allows me greater effectiveness inside of change. And all this is myself. I can't change the way it's changing. And so I think that's where the focus is missing for the people we're speaking to on this particular call is the inability to develop self in a way that allows them a more able, effective, peaceful, loving world for themselves in the midst of this external world that they have to live in, this challenging external world.
And do you believe there is a solution to that? What
Yeah.
could be?
So there's so many models and methods to get to the more core of oneself. I happen to utilize several methods in my work in the Eldering Institute. But, there are transformational programs throughout the country. There are incredible people who are working on most of the people in your market, your age bracket, they go to conferences and the conference is about, more, better, and different of what they're already doing or how to climb their particular dictated ladder of success within the industry that they're focusing on. But there are courses about, how to find out more about what is a human being? What is it about me? How am I relating to everything in my life in this particular way? And and can I find a better way to do that? You're here and most people do not live in the moment. They live in either the future or the past. And if you take a look at the way your mind works, what you'll see is it's not an ally. It's more of an enemy. And we don't have, for most of us, we don't have much say in what our mind thinks. Can you predict your next thought?
Not really, no.
No, you can't. But if you stop for a moment, and we can for this moment, and you just be here, what you'll see is it's unstoppable. That it's a machine, and it's the one that determines perception and how you feel about yourself, and how you feel about your job, and how you feel about your neighborhood. It's the one that's giving you your world, but it's not necessarily true. And once you just start to see that particular, I wonder about that thought. And once you move more as an observer to your thinking, greater a witness to that which is going on, you have some distance from it. And within that distance, you're able to make better choices about what you're dealing with. You're an adult now. When you were a kid, you were told what to do. Who's telling you what to do now is your mind. And that mind is, is full of thoughts. And where do those thoughts come from and how legitimate are they? And are they supporting you? Or are they diminishing you? There's a phenomenon that many people point to called the inner critic. And if you look at most of your thinking, it is not very kind to you. It really is. You're not good enough. You should have done it this way. There's guilt, shame, and blame. Oh, there's all that encapsulated in how the mind thinks about itself. It keeps you your way. Um, so the ability to distance yourself and have greater capacities with what's occurring in that interior and be able to have a more audience rather than the player. My mind is the stage and I'm the actor. But sometimes you need to get into the audience and go, So that capacity to be aware of a certain level of consciousness is what I think is the thing that would resolve what we are talking or diminish what we are talking about. So you asked me what is the missing for your generational capacities. I would say consciousness and self-awareness. Those things, if they were present, would allow for a different way to be in life around what's going on.
What about habits? Do you think these would help to establish those processes and paths to be able
Yes,
to get to know oneself better? And if yes, do you have maybe an example of one habit that you utilized throughout your life that really impacted you in a positive way?
there are. Part of the issue is discipline. So you won't do anything. Human beings are really interesting, and I happen to be one of them. So I usually don't move or change until something happens in my life: death of a loved one, sickness, illness, loss of a job. All of a sudden there's what I'll call a shocking moment. So if I'm going to change, it usually requires something to push me off my lane. So, okay. The people that I work with, I'll just tell you what we do in our institute, is we use many disciplines and practices to access what it's like to grow old in our culture. Because it's not a culture, it's a great culture to visit, but not one to grow old in. We discard, isolate, marginalize, warehouse old people, and we don't even listen to them. If my example when I'm talking to corporate in this domain is I said, if I applied for a job in your company and you asked me for my age and I put 71, would you even consider hiring me? And so there's ageism that is really pervasive throughout our Western culture. So what I'm doing is, and interestingly enough, we started with people the ages between in our institute between 61 and 84. That was our market. And then I got calls from middle-aged people going, something's missing. I've gotten to a high level of success, but I'm still not. And now it's down to I've got a couple 38-year-olds, 39-year-olds who are now engaged in the institute going, oh, okay, this is what's been missing for me. So our disciplines is we have people meditate. It's a discipline, and it's a daily discipline for me. There are times when I just don't want to. So doing things you don't want to and doing them anyway, I call it discipline. Say, okay, go into the gym. So this is one of them. So we have a meditation instructor, and we have meditation exercises, and we have. If you go onto my website, we on the Sangha page there are meditations that you can have, and there's no cost. We do yoga. Now, there's a lot of different forms of yoga. One is hatha yoga, where you use your body to release your energy and get more flexibility. So, most of us practice some form of yoga. I'm a practitioner of jnana yoga, yoga of the mind. So, I work with people to use the mind to have, free themselves from their mind. An example would be that a koan. You know, you have to, at least in the Zen tradition, you would have to have a koan that has no logical answer and be with that. So that disrupts the mind. Uh, and then we have movement, and we have sharing, and we have lots of things, journaling. So we have people in various practices that allow them to distance themselves from the way the culture and family systems and environment hold aging, so that they have greater capacities to deal with the problems that come with aging. But I think that same model is applicable to people between 18 and 30 to deal with the same issues by through meditation, jnana yoga, which is really self inquiry, um, hatha yoga. Yeah, and knowledge is great. Reading about stuff is great, but it never quite gets you there. It's like there's a difference between reading about sex and sex. They're not the same. There's an experiential component that needs to be a piece of the picture. So they are able to experience something it's all internal. It's already there. The experience of their greater humanity, an experience of their greater appreciation for themselves, an experience of a greater love and respect for themselves and other people. Self compassion would be a, a perfect example. So yeah, so those are the disciplines that we utilize, but people have to have an initiating something to have them go in and go down this path.
Okay, and you talked about mind yoga and discipline, making changes, but you did say pushing someone out of the lane, making them uncomfortable, shock them, would make them change the way of thinking or start something to change about themselves. Wouldn't there
Yes.
be a solution or a better way of implementing that shocking kind of program or situation where it would literally push people to break the
I,
boundaries and
I,
start those disciplines to make them
there may
better as
there,
human beings?
there may be there may be. I don't think there's a gentle way to do this. I think people. Are you married? You have a girlfriend? What's your story?
Yes, yes, I'm married. Yes,
Did you have a girlfriend before you got married?
yes,
And
a few.
did she break up with you?
Yes,
How was that? Was that shocking?
hurtful. Yeah, shocking.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Did you change?
Um, in a way, yes. At some situations, after
Yeah.
some
Exactly.
relationships, after some, no, I didn't because I didn't think it was down to me to be a different person. I was always trying to
I
be
know.
myself.
So, when the event happens, the first thing is that you look outside of yourself, and usually there is fault, blame, um, guilt, and shame, and anger, and all the emotional stuff that comes with it. But at some point, you also begin to take a look from responsibility. What did I have to do with this thing occurring? And it's at that moment, that you open up the next lane to, what about me do I need to change so that that doesn't happen again? And so that's the opening right there. So, yeah, that kind of event, that heartbreak, that will get you there. There's many. Have you ever been fired from a job?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, did you change? Did you look at
Uh,
yourself and or did and again, you started out with them, but then it becomes over to here and like, you're not
yeah, of
now
course, I
doing
got
something.
more confident in processing and analyzing how things evolved into that
Okay.
stage. So, yes.
And part of that analysis was, how do I evolve inside of that space? How was that? Who am I? That path of self inquiry, self awareness, and self consciousness is one that is more rewarding than the success externally that we spoke about in the beginning of the call. That's where it's missing from me. You said, how do we make the adjustment? How do we meet the challenges? How do we deal with a chaotic world? How do we deal with the rapid accelerated changes that we're dealing with? And I'm saying you can't have as great an influence on that as you can on this. And has much greater depth. This is a much deeper well than this, because this is it's impermanent. It changes. Jesus said it first. Anything that moth or rust can corrupt is going to go away. Buddha said it. Impermanence is part of life. Nothing lasts. The most elemental parts of human are the ones that do not change. Get in touch with those elements. That's where the solidity lives.
But that would mean we only can get wiser and better in life with experience and time.
Yeah,
As we
that's true.
always make mistakes and we learn from them, and then we progress throughout time, life, craft our journey, craft ourselves, and then we are the elders. Shouldn't
Yes.
we, or shouldn't the society, or shouldn't we be dealing more with elder people who've experienced all these things, made those mistakes, failed, shaped themselves,
Yeah.
or stayed the same and mentored by them from the very young age? Shouldn't those be the people who we should be looking up to?
Yes. Now I want to go underneath that, if you don't mind. So, in traditional cultures, nothing much changes, and the job of an elder at that moment was to make sure that the continuation of the tribe or the community doesn't make the stupid mistakes and cares for each other in a particular way. So, elders had a purpose and were held in high regard and revered to be able to stabilize and bring the history and bring the values and sustain the values inside of that environment. Well, we live in a non traditional culture. And that makes it a problem because there's, in any communication, there are two elements there's the speaker and there's the listener. And in my view, listening is more powerful than speaking. So if I'm not being listened to as an elder, then I have no opportunity to bring my wisdom into that conversation. What is things that I'm working on is to change the listening about eldering in our culture. So you use that word elder. Most people don't use that word. It really means older to them. That's what it means. And older is a bunch of characteristics. It's a bunch of ways that they see it. Take a look at your television and see how many old people are represented there. And when they are represented, how they are. Forgetful, uh, polydentures. I mean, just the whole spectrum of older is not what an elder is. An elder is a way of being in the world. And you're right about it. They're ones that have gone through, taken knowledge and mulched it with experience. And out of that comes wisdom. But wisdom to be effective has to be heard. And if there's no listening for it, then it can't. They'll go to open AI before they'll go to an elder, and they'll trust that as opposed to the experiential speaking of an elder. How we do it is if we have a large enough group, we have what we call a circle. And in the middle of the circle, we put our elders. And on the outer circle, we put everybody else. And then there's a stand up mic, and there's something called a talking stick. Well, I don't know where mine is. There's a talking stick where you hold that and you tell the truth. And so I ask the elders to come up to the mic and hold the talking stick and speak wisdom. And they begin with, I do the first statement, and then they follow with the word and they say what they say, and then they end with, I have spoken. And then they pass the stick on to the next one. And by two things occur. One always is, I've never been asked to speak wisdom before. And given the power of listening, by the third speaker, people are listening for wisdom. And wisdom comes out much more fluidly, much more powerfully, much more directly. And so it is heard. And that kind of listening is not present or has to be carved out in the usual mixes, the culture businesses that I work with. An old guy comes to the meeting, no one listens to him. It's really pretty simple. They get one of the things that we have is a program called the Departing Program. These are for people who are about to retire in business. And they're getting marginalized. They're not listened to at meetings. They're not included. They're being pushed towards the exit. And there's where all the wisdom lives. So that asset disappears. I like to get that way down, that wisdom to your particular audience. If they could begin to understand that it's them that's seeing how it isn't how it is. When they have that capacity to be that particular way of being in the world is going to not be as threatening, as fearful, as charged as it is.
Open and eye, you mentioned that people now trust more what's putting out as a system to them than what they would have heard from an older or elder person. How do you think we can fix the problem of listening? The attention span of younger people or all people around the world now is so much shorter. We used to read, now we watch things or listen because we're too lazy to go through all the lines and consume that piece of information. So video content, for example, are the most convenient one. But how do we fix the listening issue when no one is listening, actually?
I'm working on it. So,
I thought I'm going to get some really good answers here.
I mean, if I had it figured out, I'd be a little bit more effective at it than I am probably. Here's what I notice. All of us are human beings. All of us are innately gifted with particular elements that are not well maturated. Let me give you a direct example. So, what I have said so far in this interview, has it affected you? Has it made you think newly? Has it made you look differently at yourself or at your audience? Yes or no?
Yes, because I'm purely focusing on what you're saying. So it's a one-to-one.
Exactly. Well, you're listening.
Yes, I'm listening.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Listening is one part, but understanding that piece of information is another one. So
Perfect. That's exactly right. That you can understand means you already have it inside of you. If I speak wisdom, wisdom only ignites your wisdom because it already lives within. It's human. Same thing with spirituality, same thing with love. It's inside. And what it does, it gets ignited in a way. But yeah, you're right. How to have the listening be present in order for the speaking to be effective. However, the understanding has to also be there. And I don't worry about that part because you're a human being and you have wisdom already implanted. It's part of your DNA. We've been around for 300,000 years. We have had wisdom. It's part of that little adenine phosphate group. It's like perfect. It's just not brought forward. It's not. distinguished, but it lives over there. And so if they can stop and listen, I don't have to worry about them. The understanding comes from its. Oh, now I see. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes sense. That means it makes sense because you already have it, and it makes more clear what is being spoken. Oh, yeah. So wisdom touches those parts of humans that allow them to see themselves more clearly. Oh, huh, I didn't know that. Yeah, that makes, of course. So, yeah, and I don't know how to do it. I just know it needs to get done. So I'm trying everything I can to this interview being one. I mean, how many opportunities do I get to talk to a population of 16 to 30-year olds in my life? This is extraordinary to be able to have this conversation for me. It's like, whoa, this is great. Because I'm going to have people think newly out of this conversation. What's missing in their lives is not more. It's not being smarter. It's not having more money. Because I have been down that road with lots of different people. I spend time with people who are dying. And no one's ever said, I wish I had more money. No one ever said, what they do is they have regrets. I wish I would have loved more. I wish I would have been more self expressed. I wish I would have let myself have greater times in life. So when I said in the beginning of the call, what wisdom is being able to express living your life backwards from your end and telling people what the value is, but they need to see that value in their own persona and how it would make a difference for their daily lives. So that's what wisdom would contribute.
Talking about wisdom, what it is, you've already explained, but what would be a piece of advice or wisdom you would want to pass, absorb, understand, and apply to younger generations? Maybe those first steps into becoming a better person and
Mm.
more loving person.
The elements that I would think would make them a better person is to master the capacity to listen. It's because they're not hearing you cannot hear what you cannot hear. Um, mm, so opening that portal a little bit wider to the wisdom of the world, because it lives out there. There have been wise people on the planet forever, unheard of here in our world. We and so you can't gain the gift of wisdom until you can hear it. And so what needs I believe needs to be mm, a part of the breakthrough is the capacity to hear it. And if they can hear it, they have to be it. And if they are hearing it and being it, they will see themselves and in their lives differently. Wow. Could you tell me what you just heard out of that?
No, because I need to process it in my own mind to form
Huh.
my own understanding. Because I would be repeating only words, but I don't
Okay.
want to repeat words. I want to digest the information and place
So,
it into my mind so I have that
yeah, so that's
firm
the experiential route.
block
That's what
of.
I'm talking about. That's perfect. That's perfect. But at the moment of speaking, there is some level of impact. What impact did that speaking have on you?
Well, there is a mixture of things, kind of ripping out some past memories, uh, attracting or yeah, attracting some future thoughts and things I'm thinking on a regular basis about, but also the present, how I could combine all those things into being in this moment here right now and apply these things rather than thinking what's going to be out there tomorrow in front of my door, or what have I missed and didn't do yesterday. So
All that.
putting all that energy into one place, and I think it's quite impactful
Yeah, very good.
because it
So
stimulates your
we
thinking process.
okay. You have just experienced a wisdom conversation. Okay, so it has an experiential component to it. It has an intellectual component to it, and I'm going to say it might be a little bit off base, but it has a spiritual component to it. Um, let's drop into that for a minute. So, one of the things that, as you get to be an elder, is you discover that all human beings have transcendental assets. You know, the form of God has lived on the planet forever. And so, if it wasn't useful, it would not be in existence. There is a longing for some level of spiritual connection that is now very suppressed within our Western culture. Uh, Church doesn't work. And the people that profess, the Christian nation don't work for your generation. It's just, I'm not, they're all politicians. It's out of integrity with what they're speaking about. But there is some spiritual nature that we all have that isn't nurtured, isn't expanded, and it's embarrassing to really bring into the daily activities that we have. Part of being an elder is not being embarrassed by it. Being related to it in a particular way where it doesn't seem unnatural. And there are many forms that you can, given our group, we call the Sangha. Many of the Sangha members, we have Buddhists, we have conservative Christians, we have Zen folks, we have agnostics, we have all of that who are learning how to be elders in today's times and world. But they all are working on figuring out their channel and or opening up their channel further to that spiritual elements that enrich life and that have you see what you are in the world has a larger capacity than you would as a limited human being. So we see that as part of the eldering conversation as well. And I don't know, most people between 16 and 30, and I'm not talking about devout of anything, I'm talking about related in a way to what that is, so that it becomes more of a ally than a foreign element in their lives would make a difference as well.
Okay,
It's
understood.
interesting. I just want to know. I have also some. When you end the statement with "okay," um, what does that mean for you? What is it? It means that you got the communication, or it was. I don't know what "okay"
My
means for you.
apologies for that. I speak three languages: English, Polish, and German. So for me, it's the shortest way of acknowledging, understanding that communication that has been signaled towards me. So I don't want
Okay.
to be disrespectful and saying, okay, let's move to the next point. And
No, I
sorry,
just want to know what it means for you.
you should find a more suitable word for it. In that current moment, I think it's the fastest way of me signaling that I've absorbed and understood that message. So
Yeah,
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 yeah, received that
yeah,
message,
yeah.
understood.
This is I'm also a coach. And so if you sometimes if coaching isn't asked for, it feels like accusation. And I don't mean to be accusatory, but completing the sentence with okay uh, doesn't let the speaker know that he's been heard. He's been listened, but he hasn't been heard. So I would shift that in your process to say, oh, that makes sense. I got it. I'll think about it. So that the speaker knows that what he said has landed. Okay doesn't mean it's landed. It means it's flying around
Absolutely the opposite, but
bigger field.
I totally agree with you that okay is not the right terminology of
Yeah,
using
and
provide a response to a quite rich and meaningful message because it
yes,
sounds
exactly,
ignorant.
exactly. So you may try on. I got it. Thank you. So there's a part. I used to lead communication courses for a transformational organization, and one of the things that was important in communication. This is also part of wisdom. Is all this experience that goes into talking to people for me. And one of them was is when people speak with you, what they want to do is be heard. It's a gift. Listening to somebody is a real gift, and they have all these things that they talk about empathy and recreation and all the techniques that are out there. But I think if you really hear somebody, you're listening from a point of view. You're listening great because you're taking it all in and trying to figure out how to put those pieces already into where there's it. It doesn't quite fit yet, so it's got that kind of push on it. But to end the conversation, to have the speaker feel empowered, you need to come up with a better ending than okay. And the one that I often use is when I got it. Thank you. And then the thank you puts like a period on it. And so you want to try that out. And then the speaker will feel more at ease. And this is also wisdom speaking here. Just think, yeah, I got it. Oh, huh. Show the speaker that it's impacted you by your ending statement, and that will make the speaker more comfortable, and the relationship will get closer. When people don't listen to me, I don't. The relationship is strained. So the art of listening, the ability to listen, the ability to respond in a way, to hear, those are things that are not used. They're not on AI. AI cannot do that. Just can't. It can replicate, it can duplicate, but it can't listen. It can answer, but it can't listen. When you listen, and I watched you, you not only listen for the words, you listen for what's between the words, the implicit. And that is powerful. That is really, that's why you're in the game. You heard something that wasn't yet articulated in terms of what you could do for your generation, and give them something that for you personally experience, that you want them to engage with you in finding out and to expand that experience. And you're bringing wisdom at your level to that. That's how you're doing it. But you listen. Anyway,
I totally appreciate what you just said, and thank you very much for the very short one-to-one session where picking up the way how I communicate and how I should address things. No, it's very helpful because not many people do it. Some people just go with it and say, okay, that's fine. Or some people are not very confident to maybe address someone and point something out to an individual. On the other hand
that's
side, an individual, when they receive some pointers, they might find it's criticizing someone and they see it in a negative way and it's a red flag.
all right, young man.
First of all, I wanted to thank you for your time and the conversations, stories, and guidance, and many tips you've shared with me today. I really appreciate that. I hope we're gonna continue our conversation outside this interview. Keep in touch. Hopefully, I can reach out to you at any time and maybe ask for some more wisdom if you're willing to share.
I would love
And
that. I'm up to. I'm going to support you in what you're up to. You have the. I was going to use a scatologic term, but you have the courage to do something that no one else is willing to do at this moment. And there's other people doing what you're doing. You're just not connected. Nothing happens in an isolated fashion. Henry Ford did not invent the car. There was a lot, and nor did Edison with the light bulb. So there's others out there. I think one of your challenges is to get the others that are working in the same domain that you are, into a larger conversation about how do we impact that segment of our country or our societies or our world. But you're getting ready to be that global figure. So from my viewpoint, you're right on track. And I have
thank you
been
very much.
down the lane before. Uh, so the wisdom also is complementary to say, hey, man, you're doing the right thing at the right time for the right people. Good work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.